Windows and macOS on a laptop. You want the best of both worlds, right? Windows power and macOS magic. On the same machine? It sounds like rocket science. But what if I told you it's actually way simpler than you think? Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Hackintosh is hard. Hours of cryptic guides, endless troubleshooting, that's the old way. But today we're doing things differently. We're skipping the complex stuff and jumping straight to the easy path. We're talking dual boot macOS and Windows on your laptop or computer without getting lost in the desert. This new guide has already gained feedback on how fast and easy the installation went. There's a lot of tutorials out there, but assure you, this one is worth it. To make this video easier to follow, I've added timestamps for each step in the process. You'll find them in the description box below. Use them to quickly jump to any section you'd like to review. In this tutorial, I will demonstrate it through this NEC Versa Pro VGS laptop. This has Intel Core i5 with 5th generation processor, 4 GB worth of RAM, 120 GB of NVMe drive, Intel Wi-Fi card, and a broken screen that is connected on a Gamdius monitor via HDMI connection. But before we dive in, we need to make sure your computer is even compatible. Don't worry, even that part is easier than you think. In this step, I'll show you the streamlined way to check compatibility and then step-by-step install macOS on your Windows laptop. The easy way. Ready to unlock the macOS side of your laptop? Let's go. Alright, first things first, compatibility. Now the classic way to check is Dortania's OpCore install guide. It's incredibly thorough, but let's be honest, it can be a bit overwhelming. It provides detailed instructions on configuring the OpCore bootloader, focusing on hardware compatibility, ACPI patching, and Kext management. The guide emphasizes understanding the underlying processes, promoting a stable and secure macOS experience, and requires users to have a level of technical understanding and willingness to learn. It's incredibly thorough, but let's be honest, it can be a bit overwhelming. But remember, we're doing the easy way. That's where OpCore Simplify shines. This tool actually helps you figure out compatibility practically automatically. Go ahead and do a Google search for it. On the GitHub page, click on the green code button and download the zip file. I will save it on the desktop for easy access. Go into the desktop and right-click on the OpCore Simplify.zip file. Select Extract All. Choose a destination folder where you want to extract the contents. Click Extract. Go inside the extracted folder and locate for OpCore Simplify.bat. Double-click it to run the program. A command prompt window will open. The window that appears will automatically check if Python 3 is installed on your system. If it's not found, you'll see a prompt asking if you want to install it. To proceed with the installation, type the letter Y and then press the Enter key on your keyboard. It will download Python 3 and install it all together. The script will now perform several automated tasks, like downloading files. It may download necessary OpCore files, Kext drivers, and other required components. Organize the downloaded files into the correct folder structure for OpCore. Now here is the main menu of OpCore Simplify. Type 1 on your keyboard, then press Enter. It will download the hardware detection called Hardware Sniffer to gather information about your computer's hardware. From here, type E, then Enter. The script initiates information gathering by executing a series of commands designed to identify the computer's core components. It will determine the CPU's model, vendor and architecture, as well as the motherboard's manufacturer, model, and chipset. Graphics card information, network adapters, both Ethernet and Wi-Fi, along with the audio controller and storage devices, providing a comprehensive overview of the system's hardware configuration. Now here's the results so far. Notice the light blue text that says, "Up to macOS Sequoia." This means my hardware is capable of running macOS on that version, but since my graphics card has Intel HD 5500, it can only run until Monterey version. The ideal Hackintosh laptop within the specified Intel generations would have an 8th or 9th generation Intel CPU, Intel UHD 620/630 graphics. Avoid laptops with Intel 11th to 14th generation and with a dedicated NVIDIA Optimus graphics, as they are generally incompatible with macOS. As for AMD laptops, Ryzen processors, specifically Ryzen 3000 and 5000 series, these generations have gained significant traction within the Hackintosh community due to their relatively good compatibility with Radeon Vega graphics as well. If you have a desktop PC with Intel 11th to 14th generation, you will need to pair it with a supported AMD GPU 500 to 6000 series, which are generally preferred for hackintoshing due to their native macOS support. And if you have NVIDIA GPUs on the same Intel generation 11th to 14th, NVIDIA are generally not recommended for hackintoshing due to the lack of recent macOS drivers. NVIDIA support has been dropped by Apple, so it is best to avoid them. Now going back to the results, if you have unsupported CPU and GPU, especially if you have Celeron and Intel Atom processor or older ones, this means that your hardware is incapable of running macOS on it. Better install Linux on those systems. If you have unsupported Wi-Fi card, as of now, Intel-based Wi-Fi cards are highly preferred, as they have excellent macOS support. If you have Broadcom Wi-Fi card, you will need to patch it using OCLP. Great, you've got hardware that's ready for macOS. With that confirmed, we're ready to proceed. We'll now focus on the steps needed to get macOS installed. The EFI folder is the heart of a Hackintosh setup, providing the necessary components to bridge the gap between your hardware and macOS. Inside the EFI folder contain a bootloader. OpCore and Clover are type of bootloaders used to install macOS on non-Apple hardware, Hackintoshes. OpCore is a newer, more modern bootloader, emphasizing stability, security, and closer adherence to Apple's boot process. Clover, while historically popular, is older and can be more complex to configure, often relying on more extensive patching. OpCore is now generally recommended due to its improved compatibility and maintainability, making it the preferred choice for most Hackintosh users. We will use OpCore on this video guide. Without a properly configured EFI folder, macOS won't be able to boot on a Hackintosh. But where and how can we acquire this mystical EFI folder? Well, here are a few ways to acquire it, each with its own nuances. Number 1 is Dortania's OpCore install guide. It provides a step-by-step process for building your EFI folder from scratch. You'll download the necessary components, OpCore bootloader, Kext, and configure them yourself based on your specific hardware. This method emphasizes understanding the process and ensures a tailored EFI folder. Number 2 is GitHub repositories. Search on Google for the model of your machine followed by Hackintosh. Many Hackintosh users share their working EFI folders on GitHub. You might find an EFI folder that's compatible with your specific hardware, saving you time and effort. Typically, it is well documented which one works and does not. Click the releases on the right side, and you will be able to download the zip file of the EFI folder. If you choose this route, thoroughly research the repository and understand the configuration. Number 3 is ChefKiss Inc. This one is for those AMD-based processor. It's like Dortania's install guide, but for AMD. It directs you to the necessary components, like the OpCore bootloader itself, Kext, and ACPI patching tools, but you'll download and assemble them yourself. This is the most recommended way to make an EFI folder for AMD. If you use a ChefKiss method, ensure it's compatible with your exact hardware. And the last but not the least. I don't know if you have a clue about it. Number 4 is OpCore Simplify. This is actually an automated EFI generation program. OpCore Simplify and similar tools aim to automate the process of creating an EFI folder. The advantage is that it simplifies the setup process. The potential issues of this automated tools might not always generate a perfect configuration. If something goes wrong, it can be harder to troubleshoot if you don't understand the underlying configuration. In essence, the best way to acquire an EFI folder is to build it yourself using Dortania's guide. This will give you the most control and understanding of your Hackintosh setup. But for this guide, we'll stick to OpCore Simplify for now. As a side note, you will run OpCore Simplify to the computer that you will run macOS, which is in my case this NEC Versa Pro laptop. Going back to this window of OpCore Simplify, press Enter to continue, and you will be brought back to the main menu. Since this laptop is natively supported to Monterey, I will go for it. The EFI options are shown here with the SMBIOS equivalent to my hardware. There is nothing much to do here. We will proceed to build the EFI folder. You can press 6, then Enter. It will now proceed to download the necessary files for our configuration. and will automatically build our EFI folder altogether. Doing this, you will have the up-to-date bootloader, drivers, and Kext. It will go through the downloading of the latest version of the OpenCore bootloader from its official source, usually GitHub. It will then extract the necessary files from the downloaded archive. Based on the hardware information gathered by the hardware sniffer, the script will download the required Kexts or drivers. The script will organize the downloaded Kexts into the correct folder structure within the EFI folder. The script will assemble all the components into the correct folder structure. It will then copy the newly generated EFI folder into the results folder of OpCore Simplify. Then after it, we will do the USB port mapping. You may now press enter to continue and type Q to quit and close the command prompt. Go ahead and make a Google search for USB Toolbox. Right-click the first link in a new tab, then click the second link below it. From the release section for the right, download the USB Toolbox release.zip and I will save it on the desktop. Then on the other tab, do the same by going into the release page, then download the executable windows. Minimize the browser and let's run the windows.exe. From this command prompt, press D on your keyboard, then enter to discover the ports. Then press B to go back. From here, type S to select ports and build Kext. Then press K to build the utbmap.kext. It will now create utbmap.kext on the desktop. Close the command prompt window. Extract the USB Toolbox release.zip. Drag the USB Toolbox.kext into the desktop. Now we need to add both UTB-map and USB Toolbox Kext into our EFI folder. Open into the OpCore Simplify folder, under the Results subfolder, navigate EFI, then OC, then Kext folder. Then drag the two Kexts into that folder. Do a quick Google for OCAT, short for OpenCore Auxiliary Tool, and from the release page, download the Windows 64.zip and save it on the desktop. Then you may need to extract the zip file afterwards. Go into the extracted folder and look for the OC Auxiliary Tool.exe, then run it by double-clicking. Once it loads up, click this Update button, then click the Get the latest version of OpenCore button. This will grab the new OpenCore version from the source. It will prompt you once it's successfully updated to the latest one. Close the window and head over to File, then Open. Navigate the OpCore Simplify folder and locate the Results folder, EFI, OC, then select the config.plist. From the left sidebar, click on the kernel, scroll all the way down and see if UTB-map and USB Toolbox.kext are present. If not, manually add it by clicking the plus button on the right side, then navigate the Kext folder inside the OpCore Simplify. It will be now added into your configuration and automatically be enabled. In case you want to disable it, just uncheck the checkbox and it will be set to false. Now click the NVRAM on the left, then click on the third entry, and on the right, look for boot args. You can double-click the text box entry next to it, type in -V, then press Enter. This will enable you to look at the boot logs when your Hackintosh is loading on the startup, and it will be helpful later on to pinpoint any errors along the way. You can now click the Save button and close OCAT. This next step is optional, but highly recommended. You can perform a sanity check by comparing the EFI folder generated by OpenCore Simplify with the configurations outlined in Dortania's OpenCore install guide. This helps ensure everything is set up correctly. For a visual guide on how to do this, you can watch the video linked here. Visit my website on your browser, it's lightmint09.mystrikingly.com, and let's download the necessary files. Click on the programs, click the RDrive image, and it will be linked to MediaFire. Click the blue download button. I will save them up on the desktop. Then the next one is the registry file for the synchronization of the time clock. Click the blue download button. I will save them up on the desktop. For the restore image or RDR file, I will go for the Monterey version. This is about 12 gigabytes or so. Click the blue download button from MediaFire. And the next one is the Disk Genius. It will be redirected from their website. Click the free download button. Double-click the synchronized time.registry file. This will sync the time in between macOS and Windows altogether. Click Yes when prompted. Let's partition the disk in preparation of the installation of macOS. Right-click on the Start button and select Disk Management. I only have one disk. I will shrink the drive C in this case. Right-click and shrink volume. This will query for the available space to shrink. Right now I have 71 gigabytes available, but I will make most of it around 60 gigabytes, so I will just type in 62,000. Then click the Shrink button below. If you have a second disk and you want to install there, I will discuss that next on Disk Genius. Close the Disk Management, and let's install and open up the Disk Genius. Upon launching the installer, an installation wizard will guide you through the process. Click Next to proceed. Wait for the installation to complete, and then click Finish to exit the wizard, then launch Disk Genius immediately. This free space right here is the shrinked volume that we did a while ago. On the left, this disk is formatted as GPT. Make sure you have GPT disk. Now right-click on the free space, the Create a New Partition. Make the file system type into EFI System Partition. Then allocate the size to megabytes and type in 300. Then on the volume label, give it some name, type in OpCore, then click OK. On the upper left, click the Save All button and click Yes when prompted. Now double-click on that partition of OpCore. Head over to the OpCore Simplify folder under the Results subfolder. We will now then drag the created EFI folder going into the Disk Genius window. Click the Complete button afterwards. If you plan to install it on the secondary drive, this is how you will do it on Disk Genius. Make sure you don't have files on the drive. Let's assume this RD1 SanDisk Cruiser is your second drive. This drive has MBR partition scheme. You must convert it first to GPT or GUID partition table. To do it, right-click on the disk, then select Convert to GUID. Right-click on the disk above, then select Delete Current Partition. Click the Save All on the left. Click Yes when prompted. Right-click on the disk above, then this time select Create ESP Partition. Uncheck the Create MSR Partition. Click OK below once done. Then click the Save All button above. Click Yes when prompted. Double-click the ESP partition, and we will copy the EFI folder on here. Head over to the OpCore Simplify folder under the Results subfolder. We will now then drag the created EFI folder going into the Disk Genius window. Click Yes when prompted. Click the Complete button afterwards. Now we will add the OpCore bootloader into the boot entry of the computer. On the menu above, click Tools, select Set UEFI BIOS Boot Entries. On that window, click the Add button, locate the ESP partition that we made, and under the EFI folder, go into the OC subfolder, then select OpCore.EFI. Now click the Up button once. This will make the OpCore as the first boot priority. Then on the boot entry name, put OpCore, then click the Save Current Boot Entry. You may now close Disk Genius. Now locate and install the RDrive image program. Go through the installation process of it and don't launch the program yet. Uncheck it and click the Finish button. Now locate your Monterey RDR file and double-click it. The password for this Monterey is Lightment09, then click OK. From here, click anywhere on the source disk above, then move your mouse pointer going to the unallocated disk space and click it. Now click the next button below and hit the Start button. It will now proceed to restore macOS into your chosen disk. Have some coffee while waiting. It took less than 5 minutes for it to finish the restoration on this laptop. Close RDrive image program, for we no longer need it. Now open the Disk Genius and click on the Tools menu, then set UEFI BIOS boot entry. Check the Enter UEFI BIOS configuration interface, then click the Restart button next to it. This will enable us to boot directly on the BIOS, and see you there. Welcome to the BIOS of your computer. Yours may be different since not all BIOS are the same for the entire computer systems. Generally, this is the settings that you need to adjust so that the macOS would run perfectly on your machine. You can pause this video to see the settings. If you have the same options, then adjust them accordingly. But for this laptop, I just need to set the Secure Boot to Disabled and exit out from the BIOS by navigating on the far right, and it will reboot. If you've done it successfully, you will be greeted with this OpCore boot splash. I will select the Monterey SSD using the right arrow on the keyboard and pressing Enter. It will now load macOS on this laptop. If your computer freezes or halts during the boot process, displaying scrolling text. This text is crucial. By examining the last lines of the scrolling text, you can pinpoint the exact stage where the boot process stopped, providing valuable clues about the cause of the issue. Nonetheless, if you made it through the welcome screen, congratulations. This laptop did 2 reboots before the welcome screen pushed through. I will skip the setup process and see you on the desktop. There's one more thing we need to do on macOS. I bet you didn't notice this. There is an extra free space when we restore macOS using RDrive image. We can simply reclaim that free space using the disk utility. Click the Launchpad, then Others, then select Disk Utility. While the Monterey SSD is selected, click the partition button above. The partition next to Monterey SSD is the free space, which is 6.3 gigabytes. Click on it, then click the minus button below it. Click the Apply button on the right. Then click the partition button, and it will proceed to add that free space up into our Monterey SSD partition. Once done, let's try to reboot on Windows 11. I will select the Windows partition and pressing Enter to boot into it. And seems the dual booting went well from macOS Monterey and Windows 11. And if in case you want to remove macOS from your computer, all you have to do is open Disk Genius again. You just need to delete the partition of the EFI of OpCore and as well as the partition of macOS. Right-click the partition, then select Delete Current Partition. Press Yes once prompted. Then do the same for the EFI partition of OpCore. Click the Save All button on the upper left. Close Disk Genius, then right-click the Start button and select Disk Management. On the Drive C partition, right-click, then select Extend Volume, click Next button twice, then click Finish button afterwards. Your Drive C is now reverted back to its original disk capacity. If you followed along and got macOS running, let me know in the comments. Give this video a like if you found this simplified method helpful. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.